Welcome to Idaho Fishing Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fishing Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
And welcome back to Idaho Fishing Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. Lots to talk about today, including when and why Fishing Game feeds wintering deer and elk, how to not rock the boat during winter fishing and waterfowl hunting, and the importance of trapping when it comes to wildlife management. But first, here's how you can take advantage of an often overlooked mountain fishing opportunity this winter. If you've been looking for an excuse to wader up and tie on some flies or jigs, then go no further than one of Idaho's native unsung heroes, the mountain whitefish. Mountain whitefish, the disco-ballish, tight-lipped river dwellers that populate a majority of Idaho's streams and rivers, are often overlooked and underhooked. In the words of Rodney Dangerfield, they get no respect. But where do these unfavorable allegations come from, and are they even accurate? Before we get into the benefits of whitefish fishing, there are a few misconceptions associated with the species that need to be cleared up. It's fair to say that many passionate anglers who've seen their rod tip dip, thinking, "Oh, I have a feisty trout on the end of the line," only to reel in something else, have muttered the words, "it's just a whitefish." But that's blasphemy. That whitefish on the end of your line has earned its stripes in Idaho, a fish that has called these waters home for thousands of years. While they might not be as charismatic as the rainbow trout, regarding them as trash fish or bottom feeders is nothing more than an insult, and could not be further from the truth. Here's Joe Kozovska, Fishing Game's State Fisheries Manager.
Mountain whitefish are a fun species to target, especially in the late winter when trout and other mountain stream species feed less. Anglers have a pretty cool opportunity to catch these fish during this season, a lost tradition that often gets forgotten or overlooked.
Whitefish tend to hunker down in deeper parts of the river. Their placement in the water, combined with their mouth's puckered appearance, located beneath their face, often earn them the misnomer suckerfish.
Whitefish are actually members of the salmonid family, which include salmon, trout, char, and grayling.
In most cases where the two species coexist, Fishing Game has found that whitefish commonly outnumber trout by 5 to 10 times. But if whitefish are more closely related to trout, does that mean they're outcompeting their distant cousins? Not according to stream surveys. Some anglers might have concerns about the whitefish-trout dynamic in mountain rivers and streams. Fishing Game fish managers have been studying this relationship for decades and learned from research that trout populations can be affected by flow, habitat conditions, or even harvest, but competition with whitefish is not a real concern. With whitefish populations as robust as they are, there's only one thing left to do: go fishing. Whitefish check a lot of the boxes for stream fishing in winter and early spring, or pretty much any other time of year. They're plentiful, bag limits are high, and they're found in rivers and streams and even some lakes all over the state. You can pretty much see them shimmering when the water's low. They are more aggressive than other fish during winter, and they slurp up a fly or bait just as readily as a trout would. So then what's the holdup? Well, for starters, it should not be your tackle box. Whitefish will generally entertain the same buffet of bait, flies, and lures that your run-of-the-mill rainbow trout would. If you're accustomed to trout fishing in the warmer months, chances are your setup will work just fine for winter season whitefish. You might need some thicker waders, but you won't have to break the bank on custom flies or lures. Whitefish will readily take a single salmon egg, chunk of worm, or other bait such as maggots. They will also take artificial flies, including dry flies. Remember that compared to trout, whitefish have smaller mouths. A good rule of thumb might be sizing down your flies or lures. I mean, they're probably not going to get their mouths around a size 2 woolly bugger or a big bait hook with a glob of nightcrawler. So remember, smaller is better. Whitefish also tend to hug the bottom of the river or hole up in pools. You might entice one up to the surface to take a dry fly, but more often than not, you're going to want to drop your fly or lure right in front of their nose. You might try tossing a weighted nymph, either a caddis, a midge, or a stonefly, through slow to medium moving water during the warmest part of the day. Look for water streaked with foam and drift your line down with the current. If your smaller fly doesn't have enough weight to get it down, Or if the water is moving too quickly, you can always add a split shot weight to your line to help sink your fly or lure. You can also achieve this with a double dropper rig or a heavy fly like a beadhead woolly bugger with a smaller weighted fly like a zebra midge tied about 12 to 18 inches back. And hey, if you're not a fly fisherman, don't worry. You can achieve the same outcome with a conventional spin rod and tackle box. Common baits for whitefishing include maggots, salmon eggs, also a reliable fly pattern, or chunks of worm. Mountain whitefish gather in large schools, unlike trout, so where there's one, there's usually several more. And here's a hot tip for you. Whitefish have small, delicate mouths and are less aggressive when taking a fly. Try using a strike indicator or a plastic bobber 4 to 6 feet from your hook or fly. A well-placed strike indicator will give you a nice indication, as the name implies, when a whitefish flirts with your fly. Fishing Game offers a generous daily bag limit on whitefish, usually 25 fish per day. Be sure to check the rules, though, on whichever fishery you plan on visiting just to be safe. Anglers can capitalize on the abundance of whitefish and their liberal bag limits in a number of ways, including the supper table. Now, despite being filled with more bones than a prehistoric buffalo jump, mountain whitefish can prove to be excellent table fare worthy of any angler's palate. Whitefish can get real big real quick. In their first 3 to 4 years, a whitefish commonly grows 10 to 12 inches in length, and a mature whitefish can even exceed that, oftentimes in the 12 to 16 inch range. In fact, the state catch and release record caught in 22 came in at a whopping 21.5 inches long. That's a lot of meat, even on a relatively bony fish, and an underutilized food source. The meat is not dissimilar from that of a trout. It's light and mildly fishy tasting, but yes, it is incredibly bony, a premise that often causes anglers just to pass them up. The most popular option, though, is to smoke them low and slow in your backyard smoker. Smoking whitefish is one of the easiest ways to ensure your meal is bone-free. In the age of the internet, there are hundreds of smoked whitefish recipes out there worthy of your time. So do some research and experiment with it. See what works and what doesn't work. And above all else, have fun fishing. All right, time to talk about wintering deer and elk. Idaho's snow-capped mountains are entering their postcard phase, and temperatures range from chilling to biting cold. Many of Idaho's big game animals have migrated down from the mountains and are now inhabiting winter range until the spring. Fishing Game is preparing for emergencies by stockpiling feed and convening winter feeding advisory committees. Feed pellets and other supplies are stored in strategic locations around the state where Fishing Game may need to feed, but that decision isn't taken lightly, nor should it be. Deer and elk spend months on winter range, but forage is thin and it usually doesn't provide enough nutrition for them to maintain their weight. They're running at a caloric deficit and living off the fat they put on earlier in the year, kind of like me right now. One of the most important survival factors is how much fat they carried onto winter range. Healthy animals with abundant body fat can survive most winter conditions, and it's an inescapable truth that some won't survive. Typically, that means fawns and calves that aren't fat enough to withstand their first winter, and older animals that are near the end of their natural lives. But even in the healthiest of animals, fat reserves are limited and must be conserved. People can help deer and elk from unnecessarily burning energy by avoiding wintering herds. If you encounter deer and elk while you're outdoors, do not disturb them. One way to tell you're too close is if you see animals, pay close attention to you and start stirring. That's more likely to happen if deer and elk see dogs, which they perceive as a predator and a threat. While a few disturbances aren't likely to determine the fate of an animal, repeated disturbance may. If you're out there, others are likely to be out there as well, so take that into consideration. What you're doing may seem harmless, but when you factor in repeated disturbances over the weeks and months of winter, it can make a big difference, particularly with the fawns and calves battling to survive their first winter. Fishing Game strives to keep herds within the natural carrying capacity, but winter survival is a complex equation with many moving parts. Essentially, the natural forage should sustain the herds, not supplemental winter feeding, unless it's an emergency situation. Ensuring quality winter range habitat is a primary way of maintaining robust herds, which is why Fish and Game staff make it a priority on its WMAs to actively manage those lands to provide quality wildlife habitat. Supplemental winter feeding is intended to temporarily mitigate for extremely harsh conditions. It's done carefully and typically limited to unusual situations when abnormal weather or temporary problems overwhelm a herd's natural ability to endure winter. In some instances, Fish and Game also elects to feed big game animals to prevent damage to agricultural operations or prevent public safety issues such as herds wintering near busy highways. Fish and Game also operates one annual feeding station in the Wood River Valley to help keep elk out of local communities. When large wildfires burn huge swaths of winter range and affect a broad enough area, it also might trigger emergency feeding. If Fish and Game can temporarily feed big game herds until natural forage returns, it's an option, but not one that's taken lightly for the reasons to follow. There are winter feeding committees in parts of the state that periodically conduct emergency feeding. These committees provide timely information to Fish and Game regional supervisors so supervisors can decide whether emergency conditions exist and winter feeding is needed. Advisory committees monitor snow depth, temperatures, and quality of forage on the winter range. Extreme weather such as 5 consecutive days when temperatures stay below 0 degrees and snow depths of more than 18 inches on south-facing slopes are factors that they consider. Regardless of the severity of winter, some animals naturally perish. That's an inescapable part of nature. And animals too stressed from winter can even die when they are fed. It's human nature to want to feed animals, especially when they appear stressed. We feed our pets, we feed our livestock, and we may have bird feeders in our own yards for wild birds. But deer and elk don't fall into those categories, and there are serious downsides to feeding them. First, it may not have the effect that people think. It is usually difficult, if not impossible, to get feed to all the herds. The largest, fittest animals will often drive the smaller, weaker ones away from the feed, which ironically are the ones who would benefit the most, while the hardiest would likely survive without the feed. Feeding can unnaturally congregate large herds, which can further degrade the available forage by overgrazing it and damaging it for years ahead. It can also attract predators and spread disease and parasites between animals. Feeding may also short-stop herds that are able to migrate to other places that could sustain them. And as past experience has shown, particularly with mule deer, animals fed one winter may return to the same place the following winter expecting to be fed again. So, while emergency feeding may help some of the herds in some instances, it's not a fix-all, and there are significant downsides to consider before feeding starts. Now, this may come as a bit of a surprise, but deer aren't birds, and unauthorized feeding can cause more harm than good. It's also important that people don't start feeding big game animals. Although well-intended, feeding big game animals, particularly deer, can lead to a variety of unwanted situations. First, folks will probably give them the wrong food, and it could be deadly. Mule deer have evolved to survive on low-nutrient plants, and their digestive systems are adapted to it. When sparse, low-nutrient food is replaced by nutrient-rich forage, such as alfalfa or commercial feed, it can shock their system and can lead to deadly digestive ailments. Many wintering deer in Idaho have died with a stomach full of food, albeit the wrong type of food. Feeding will also attract more animals, and a few deer can quickly turn into dozens, and after they receive food, they're probably not leaving until spring. It's sad to see animals that appear stressed, and yes, some may ultimately succumb to the stresses of winter. But the bulk herd will survive to be stronger in the long run. All right, that's all I got on that. Just when you thought we were done talking about the cold, though, here's another important reminder to be safe out there on boats this time of year. Temperatures and snow are starting to fall across much of the state. With the onset of cold air and water temperatures, anglers and waterfowl hunters are encouraged to take precautions and practice boating safety this winter. Nearly every year, there is a boating accident in Idaho involving duck hunters or winter anglers. With water temperatures just above freezing, these accidents can tragically result in a fatality. In the past 10 years, nearly 67% of the fatal boating accidents in Idaho were the result of victims falling into the water from small boats. The most common mistake waterfowl hunters make while operating a boat is overloading the vessel. All watercraft under 20 feet in length constructed after November 1st, 1972, have a capacity plate permanently affixed in a location clearly visible to the operator while the boat is underway. The plate lists the maximum horsepower, maximum number of persons, and maximum weight capacity, including all people, dogs, and gear. By the time you strap on an outboard motor and add some hunters, dogs, and hunting gear, it's easy to exceed the weight capacity without really knowing it. Be sure to follow all of Idaho's boating laws and practice these safety measures the next time you're out on the water. For starters, always wear life jackets while on the water, especially when in transit or when the water gets rough. Small boats, combined with limited visibility and high winds, can be hazardous. Idaho boating laws requires all vessels to have at least one properly sized life jacket for each person on board. Remember, life jackets only work if they are worn. If you're running a motorized boat in the dark or in periods of restricted visibility such as fog or heavy rain, you are required to have a running light. Be prepared for changes in the weather too and dress accordingly. When floating a section of river to jump shoot or even hunt over decoys, give yourself plenty of time. An upstream wind can slow your progress even in a flowing river. Rule number 57, leave the alcohol at home. Alcohol makes a person more susceptible to hypothermia, interferes with their ability to swim, and impedes quick decision-making in an accident. And last but not least, do not be afraid to cancel the trip if the weather is looking crummy. Now, waterfowl hunters and anglers are often waiting while they're hunting and fishing, and wet rocks with a glaze of ice can be doubly slippery and lead to an unexpected cannonball in frigid water. Winter is a good time to wear neoprene waders, which are warmer and float better than standard fishing waders, and everyone is encouraged to wear a belt to keep bone-chilling water from quickly filling their waders. Waterfowl hunting is a great way to get outdoors during the fall and winter, and good preparation and following basic guidelines can ensure the outing is a safe one. Be sure to renew your annual invasive species sticker if you're planning on boating after January 1st. You can learn more about Idaho boating laws and safety guidelines by attending a free boating safety class offered throughout the year by the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation. To see if there are any upcoming classes in your neck of the woods, check out Parks and Rec's boating webpage. Okay, moving on to trapping. Regulated trapping in Idaho is a legacy with deep cultural roots. Well before the days of statehood, trappers traversed much of Idaho's mountains in pursuit of elusive fur bearers. The practice still occurs today, and it plays an important role in managing wildlife populations, particularly in managing predators. During 2021, trappers accounted for 50% of the number of wolves harvested in the state compared to other methods, underscoring the important role they play in managing wildlife populations. Many trappers in Idaho are also elk and deer hunters, and they report that they trap to help maintain important predator and prey balances. Those who participate in regulated trapping invest a significant amount of time and resources into the endeavor, and their role in managing predators is valuable. If you're in the woods, walking your dog, hiking, or hunting this winter, and come across a trap, please leave it undisturbed. Tampering with traps not only interferes with the trapper's attempt to help manage wildlife populations, but it is also illegal and eligible for citation. If you are concerned about the legal status of the trap set, please contact a conservation officer or a Fish and Game regional office. Just remember, if you do happen to encounter a trap this winter, remember there is a dedicated and passionate trapper out there who took the time to go set it. Now, for more information, or if you have questions regarding trapping in Idaho, please contact your local Fish and Game regional office or hit the link below in the description. And with that, it's time for the Rapid Fire Bulletin. Idaho Fish and Game and the City of McCall are planning to submit a funding proposal for a project to improve conditions at an existing access area on the North Fork Payette River in McCall. The Dinard Lane River Access Site is on approximately 0.75 acres of land owned by the City of McCall, just east of the Dinard Bridge. The site is used by anglers, non-motorized floaters, and other day users. At present, the site has a parking area, a trail to the river, and a small beach which can be used as a primitive, non-motorized boat launch. Idaho Fish and Game and the City of McCall Parks and Recreation staff believe this project will greatly benefit river users and the local community. To provide any questions, comments, or concerns about this project, please contact Jordan Messner, our Regional Fisheries Manager in McCall. Pondweed is once again spread throughout Moose Creek Reservoir, severely limiting fishing opportunities, with another winter drawdown in progress for this winter. Folks who like to fish at Moose Creek Reservoir are encouraged to fish the surrounding area reservoirs this winter. Rainbow trout stocking will resume in Moose Creek Reservoir during spring of 25 and will provide the same quality fishing as it has in the past. Down in southeast Idaho, Chesterfield Reservoir has been a sought-after destination for anglers for decades. While many anglers enjoy the open water season, this reservoir also supports a popular ice fishery. Given the importance of the Chesterfield Reservoir fishery to the angler community, Fish and Game's Southeast Region Fisheries Management Team sought out to answer how the reservoir was performing in 2024. This past June, we utilized our standard lowland lake methods of gill nets, trap nets, and boat electrofishing to sample the reservoir. To read the full report, hit the link in the description below to read Jenny Jackson's latest story. And beginning in December, wildlife staff will be busy conducting aerial surveys and capture work throughout a handful of regions across the state during the next couple of months. The purpose is to gather abundance and herd composition information that helps game managers understand population numbers and trends. In addition to surveys, the department will capture and collar many big game animals. Crews will then monitor the collared animals to get a better idea of herd survival and movements. For more on this story, check out the links below. Okay, that's it for this week's stories. It's time for our question of the week. This week's question comes to us from Justin S. Justin asks, if I have rifle hunted in Idaho before, do I need to take the online archery certification in order to archery hunt? Thanks for pitching us this question, Justin. Yes, if you want to archery hunt in Idaho, you must have bow hunter certification. If you go to our hunter education webpage on our website, you'll find information about bow hunter education here in Idaho. Hope this helps. And that's all the news we have for this week. Thanks for putting an ear to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin. If there's something on your mind, or if you got a question related to fish and game matters, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Again, that's podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch you next week.